One of the shining lights on the Seoul Dynasty has definitely been their star DPS player, Fleta. And one notion that has accentuated Fleta's, increasing hero pool and his overall skill has been his map rotations. And that was the kind of highlight of this video today. On this stage 1 game against the Dallas Fuel, we are going to see Fleta do these brilliant rotations where he actually is able to identify in game, like in the middle of a fight. So his game IQ, his fight IQ, whatever you want to call it, is able to identify when Dallas is committing with this very slow push composition that they're running. And what he does is he does like a 2-stage rotation where he's going to rotate in this general area where he rotates to plateau or window up here. And then from those 2 positions, he will rotate to what is more looked at as a more offensive position. But it creates a massive sightline on the point, and with the composition that Dallas Fuel is running, there's not anybody really there to stop him. So with that being said, now on this first push, it actually doesn't work out quite as intended. There's a little bit of a disconnect with Fleta's rotations and what's actually happening within the game. You'll see Toby kind of like floating around, not entirely too sure what's happening, while Fleta tries to make the rotation here in a second. So at this point, he's actually right here. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but he's actually right here. So he's rotated to window at this point. So he's identified that they're starting to make the swing around to the high ground. Now, once we see Mickey commit to defending effect here, right here, it's at this point that Fleta is actually starting to make the second stage of the rotation and actually positioning on the archway by the offensive spawn. Seoul Dynasty infiltrates the defensive fortifications of Seoul. Dallas rather infiltrates. That's looking pretty good. And we'll see effect shoot him in the head right there. Again, really cool rotations, but, obviously in this first clip, it doesn't actually work out, as intended. So in this clip, we actually are going to see Fleta make the same 2-stage rotation where he jumps down to platform and then to archway. But again, it's off of the notion that he's actually being able to receive the information from his teammates, or he's actually just able to understand the flow and the pace of the game well enough that he knows at a certain point, once they cross a certain threshold of the map, that Dallas Fuel doesn't actually have anybody to commit to actually fighting him without being offsides or out of position, right? So once this slow pushing composition pushes in, effect won't actually have any way to actually contest the archway once Fleta kind of captures it for himself. And it actually works out incredibly well for them. But this is, again, off of the back of his in-game IQ and Seoul actually pacing it out a little bit better, playing a little bit slower, and Munchkin actually finding some pressure in the back line.
Trickle in and be the same old for the Dallas Fuel. Right now in this meta, I tend to like this defensive setup a little bit better than what we've seen Dallas do, but
again, incredibly slow pushing composition where Dallas is going to be moving with amp it up, and they will not be moving without it. They amp out, they wait in this room for everybody to get ready, they amp in, and that's where Fleta starts to make the rotation. He's on the platform now, and he'll be rotating to archway in a moment. There he is, on archway. So here's a clip that I've actually talked about before, but I actually want to kind of, again, emphasize his rotations and his in-game IQ, where here we're going to see Fleta use his ultimate to bait out a ultimate from the enemy team, which is Transcendence. So he's going to attack Visor, Shaz is going to Transcendence. And then immediately after that, you're going to notice some micro positioning from him, where he actually tries to space himself completely away from Fissure, because we're going to see Fissure start to move to the right. So in response, Fleta is going to move not only to the left, but he's actually going to move to the left to actually continually try to maximize the damage with the retreat path from the LA Gladiators into their rightmost spawn room.
Clearly got all 6 ultimates right now, and once they do, that's going to be the plan. Sure, more coming around the back. We saw much get a good one.
So there, Fleta pops Tac Visor, and we'll see the response from Shaz in a moment. Again, Transcendence popped. That's great. You're trading a relatively low value ultimate for a incredibly high value ultimate. Now you're going to see the micro positioning. So he's identified, the team has identified basically that they're rotating to the rightmost spawn, which means that he will generally want to go left, right? But not only that, keep your eye on Fissure. Fissure actually still has his jump. And what Fleta's going to do here is he's actually going to move even further left than what he'd probably be more comfortable with, because he's trying to create as much space away from Fissure as possible while also being able to pressure this backline. Again, he swings left here. Fissure sees that it's really not even worth it, and Fleta still has the opportunity, if he so chose to pressure that backline. Now we're actually going to see Hydration dive Fleta, and Fleta is going to make a snap reaction, and this is actually, I'm pretty sure, a set play, where they rotate to Closet here. Jaehong follows up with a Transcendence, and that basically nullifies the Dragon Blade altogether. There we go. Again, snap decision, right into the set play, and Dragon Blade's dead. So here in the match versus Florida Mayhem, which actually happened in Stage 2, we are going to see Fleta rotate and play primarily on the low ground on this Volskaya map. And the reason why that is because majority of the time tanks are going to look at that as a great opportunity to use their movement abilities and jump on top of the Widowmaker. But the option that the Widowmaker has is to either rotate backwards to create space, or actually to rotate on the high ground, which creates even more space, and actually it's better for them, I believe, to rotate to the high ground, because they're actually then in a better position and they've kind of baited the tanks out of the way. It actually works out pretty well here in these 2 clips. So what Fleta's going to do, position on the low ground, actually gets 2 great picks here. Now the call's made basically probably for Florida to kind of stop the bleeding, right? And the bleeding is basically only coming from Fleta here. Fleta is pressuring them insanely. They're keeping them within this spawn room. There's actually nowhere else for them to go, especially this supportive backline. They have to play on this half of the room. They can't go up the stairs because they risk being shot. They can't go outside here, just like Zebuzai did. He's going to get shot in the head. And the call is then made for Manitens to come over, or Maniten, I'm sorry, to come over and actually zone Fleta out of the way. There's Manitens. Now, sorry, Maniten. I don't know why I call him Manitens. So Maniten comes over, and Fleta is actually going to grapple to the high ground, and Maniten will follow him. And at that point, he's out of options. He's going to use Defense Matrix here, and he's going to use his movement ability, which means he's a dead diva. Great target. Target selection, focus, dead. And that's the fight. That's pretty much it. Now, what's interesting about this clip is that Fleta is acting as bait here. If I'm to kind of hypothesize exactly why he's positioning in this kind of odd window position, because normally, as we'll see once we play out the clip, normally Widowmakers will be positioning on this high ground using that sightline to kind of cover the point and, you know, make some space. But what Fleta is actually doing here is actually he's rotating to take an odd angle to throw Logics off, to kind of, you know, throw a curveball at him. But not only that, but he's playing within this tiny hallway, which actually draws both the targeting of Logics and Tavik. And Tavik tries to wrap around and pressure him in a very narrow hallway. And it's not impossible, but it's very difficult for a Tracer to fight a Widowmaker within a narrow hallway, because there's no lateral movement there. It's only, well, there is lateral movement, but there's no horizontal movement, is what I meant. There's no horizontal strafing motion, so they can't actually dodge and duck and dive and try and get closer to the Widowmaker and use maybe some cover to get closer to the Widowmaker, it's just a narrow hallway. So it actually draws out and kind of baits out pressure from both DPS, which allows Seoul to actually collapse in and be able to actually make some magic happen.
They do have Logics this time around, Florida Mayhem, so there can be that duel, and we are kind of following Logic's perspective, so we'll see if he can pull
And you'll see Logic's actually peek this position over here. He actually wants to peek here. And he actually doesn't realize that Fleta is actually over here. At this point, the comm is made that Widow's on the high ground in the window, and Tvik will start to wrap around and try to pressure him through the hallway. See, there's Tvik. He's going to try and pressure him in the hallway here, and can't make anything happen. And it creates this big line in the map. And at that point, you could make Tvik a dive target because he's kind of offsides in that point, right? But again, just kind of highlighting Seoul's biggest, I think, strength right now in their in stage 2 and perhaps leading into stage 3. It definitely has to be Fleta's map rotations along with his, undoubted skill and his massive hero pool. But until next time, guys, thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to let me know. Leave a comment down below, like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, all that good jazz. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.